we're here today to help give you kind of a kickoff information session all about Firewise here in Nevada. We have two representatives who can tell us all about Firewise here in Nevada and how that fits into other Firewise programs going on. We have both some information that we'll share with you, but we also have a bunch of time for you to ask questions of our Firewise representatives here, so that you can get to know these people, especially Nikhil, who you may be working with as you are in your own journey in Firewise here in Nevada. So with that, I just have a couple things to get going in the very beginning. UNR Extension is a federally funded program, and so our programs are open to everyone. If there's anything I can do or we can do to help facilitate you participating in this, please feel free to either message me in the chat, reach out to livingwithfire.edu. We are here to help make this accessible for you all to participate. So just a little bit of an introduction here. I'm actually filling in for Jamie Royce Gomes, who's the Living with Fire program manager. My role at Living Fire is actually I do all of our youth K-12 outreach. And so if you have any questions about how Living with Fire reaches the youth, I can answer those. Then I've helped with a fair amount of Firewise stuff as well. Then we also have Nikhil from the Nevada Division of Forestry and Megan, who's a Firewise program manager. I'll let them introduce themselves in a little bit, but these are the two folks that we have here to answer all your Firewise questions. So our agenda for today, I have two polls that I'll just ask you to fill out. There are only a couple questions in Zoom at the beginning. We'll introduce you all to Nikhil, and then Megan and Nikhil will share a little bit more about Firewise. And then throughout this, if you have questions or a small enough group, feel free to put your questions in the chat, unmute yourself and ask the questions. And then we also have some dedicated time for Q&A at the end. So with that, I am going to launch our pre-workshop poll. If you could just take a time to answer some of these questions that should have popped up on your Zoom. If you don't see it or have any questions, feel free to either message me in the chat or unmute yourself. These should be kind of up for you all to see. There are a couple questions that you can just scroll through. The first one's what county that you live in, and then you can actually scroll down to be able to tell us a little bit more about yourself. Perfect. Douglas County representing incredibly well today. Nice work, all of you. And it looks like we have folks who have a pretty good mix of their background with Fire Adapted or with Firewise USA. And so that's great. There are things we can learn from you all. Some of you may have questions from your own work that you've done with Firewise USA. Others could be new, and we're here to help answer any questions that we have to help you get up and running there. All right. So I think that's everyone here. I'll just share these results a little bit. A lot of folks from the Eastern Front, as well as one person from Clark County. Thank you for being here. We have a mix of fire agency representatives, people from Nevada, community members as well. A good balance of people in their familiarity with Firewise, as well as people who are interested in learning more about Fire Adapted Nevada, which is Perfect. For the next piece on the introduction, where I'm going to introduce Nikhil from the Nevada Division of Forestry. And so Nikhil, if you want to come on in and tell everyone about your role with Fire Adapted Nevada.
Thank you, Spencer. Good day, everyone. We're talking into a computer screen right now, so that's a little bit unique. Hopefully everybody here in attendance is in this great state of Nevada, and that's where my position comes in. My name is Nikhil. I'm the Fire Adapted Nevada coordinator for Nevada's Division of Forestry. Fire Adapted Nevada is, as I understand it, is a partnership between 4 agencies, the Bureau of Land Management and the U.S. Forest Service at the federal level, University of Nevada, Reno Living with Fire program as an education opportunity, and Nevada Division of Forestry, who's tasked with implementing the concepts of Fire Adapted Nevada. Firewise is one of the tools in our toolbox to create a cohesive environment between our communities and our government agencies that protect us from wildfire. My background is in natural resources, so I'm familiar with managing various resources in the Great Basin landscape. And this new position is to educate community members to open doors for communication with their local fire protection districts, and to ultimately create identify different projects that we can complete, and in doing so, reduce the wildfire risk to communities in the wildland-urban interface. I mentioned that Firewise is one of the tools that we'll be using. It's a 8-step recognition that basically opens our doors of communication between communities as small as 8 households to work with their local fire protection districts and kind of get some advice and implement some boots on the ground actions to make their homes hardened from wildfire. We'll do that through education materials from Living with Fire and support from BLM and Forest Service. I think that I don't want to talk too much about the Firewise application process, as we'd like to hear some questions and concerns from the community. And so I'm happy to answer your questions, but I'll turn it to Megan, our national representative from Firewise. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikhil. And I just say, as we go through there and Megan shares information with that, please feel free to put questions you have in the chat or just unmute yourself and share. As we're recording this, we'll also post this recording to the Living with Fire webinars page. So for those of you who just joined and want to maybe rewatch the first 5 minutes of this, you can always follow up with that later next week as well. So with that, I'll turn it over to Megan, our Firewise USA representative here, and let her take things away.
Perfect. And if it's all right, I'm going to swap in my slides just to have as a placeholder to help me out. Otherwise, I'm really good at going down rabbit holes and getting off track. And I want to make sure that we leave time to address the things we really want to share today. So let's see. All right. Are we looking at a slideshow presentation?
Yep.
Cool. So, hi everyone, my name is Megan. I work for the National Fire Protection Association, which is headquartered out of the Boston, Massachusetts area, but I live in Spokane Valley, Washington. I'm from the West. I have a background in wildfire. In 2003, I started as a wildland firefighter with Washington DNR, spent many seasons on an engine, oftentimes in Eastern Washington, helping protect homes or mop up around homes after a large fire to ensure that those kind of, after the main front has gone through, those smoldering, skunking around embers and surface fires were put out so they couldn't find their way to that vegetation near a structure to help ignite it. Because when we look at how homes ignite during a wildfire, it's often either the embers and surface fire ahead of the main front or the things that are left behind after the main front moves through. So I did that for a long time, worked in statewide coordination and dispatch, and realized that as much as I valued that work, I was hoping to be more proactive before a fire, and really, how could we build on this idea of collaboration? And I transitioned over. And for me, Firewise USA is where I landed. And it really is built on that idea of bringing everyone together to the table to have a frank and honest conversation about wildfire in a region or a neighborhood or an area, and what are those steps that folks can take. And it's encouraging to see the variety of representation we have on the webinar today. We have community members, but we also have Fire Protection District personnel, some others. We have Nikhil from your state, and that's what it takes. It's everyone coming together. This is not a program for one person to do on their own, although we often see communities where there is maybe that one designated lead, but we're really trying to push, like, you need a strong team of varying perspectives to bring ideas to the table, to share, to get different input. So with that, let's just keep diving forward. Let's see. So Firewise USA, how do we at NFPA see it? We see it as this voluntary recognition program that really provides framework. You know, it's not a standard. It's not, you must do all of these things to your home or community, but we're providing a framework for you to work under to identify what are the hazards and threats within your community, what are the things you are doing well, and help you prioritize based on your values what actions you're going to take. The ultimate goal is to, as Nikhil said, we need people to harden their homes. We need people to do those retrofits to make them more impervious to embers. We need people to look at that 0 to 5 foot space to help ensure fire isn't being carried there. And we say people because this is private property. So when we look at the history of the program and how it came to be, you know, it started in 2002 after some various years of bad fires where communities were impacted, and NFPA had been engaged in active conversations with the Forest Service, the Department of the Interior, the National Association of State Foresters, which is how we connect to the states around the wildland-urban interface. You know, we had different codes and standards and trainings, but really they came to us with this, we have this private property problem that, you know, homes and communities are burning down in wildfires, but we, federal land management organizations, aren't responsible for them. But we see them, we see the need, and we want to help. NFPA has a long history in fire and life safety, public education, different campaigns through Sparky the Fire Dog, you know, look at smoke alarms, those different things. And so it was a really good fit with our skill set to kind of step into this space to help develop this program that starts with education and outreach, right? We all have to start from somewhere to have that basic understanding before we can take action. But then it's to help guide people into doing things, because we can't just educate. We actually need people to do those actions on the ground that are meaningful and in the right place to help protect their homes. So 2002, we tried this pilot with 12 sites. 9 of them are still active today. And it's just continued to grow. I think seeing that there's a variety of folks on here in terms of their experience, it's based in science, and a lot of you have seen the science, know the science. Living with Fire has some great resources around the home and the home ignition zone. So I don't really need to dive into that too deep, except just to say, we know there are proactive things that can be done, and that it's not just, you don't just have to throw your hands up and see the fire and figure nothing can happen, right? We know that work can be done. The model that we developed in working with the Forest Service and these pilot programs, getting feedback, looking at social sciences, really grassroots. You know, we are here, NFPA sets criteria. Your state agency is there to kind of look at the state criteria if there needs to be anything more and provide support. And then you have your local practitioners, but it comes down to the residents wanting to do this, to saying, hey, we have a problem and we want to be a part of the solution. We're not saying it's all on you, but I can't come to your home and your yard and make you do the work or do the work for you unless you give me permission. So it really has to be driven at that community, neighborhood, you know, cul-de-sac level. to see any success. And, you know, people enter the program through various ways. We have a lot of really engaged fire departments across the country. You know, in your state, in Nevada, there's a lot going on there. We see really good engagement from fire departments here in Washington, where I live, who are also working with their conservation districts in Washington, DNR, to share information and to start that conversation. But again, I tell folks, if you go to a community and you say, hey, there's this program and it might help you, and they say no, or it's like pulling teeth to get them going, I always say, keep the door open, but move on, right? You know, this is voluntary and we're trying to get people to do things, and we're not here to force it. And so if a community isn't ready yet to engage in conversation, always keep the option available, but move on. And it's that same idea, you know, I've seen in California where communities were super interested. They said, we want to do this. We want to be a part of the solution. And the fire department's like, nah, we don't know about this. We're not ready yet. And the communities stepped forward. They reached out to their state. They reached out to us, and they got it going. They developed their own local coalition. And now that fire department is on board and helping to provide resources. So the entry point can come from anywhere. It's really just about communicating, collaborating, keeping the lines open, and being positive. This is a positive engagement program that we really like to see. You know, the why, I think a lot of you know this, and I don't want to, you know, harp on these things too much, because I do want to answer questions, but we get this a lot is, well, why should we do this? Why should we be a part of it? Fires are going to happen. They've happened. They're going to keep happening. And we are seeing this increase or apparent increase in these really destructive fires where we're seeing communities heavily impacted. And we want to get to this point of where these fires can happen, because many ecosystems are dependent on them, but that communities, neighborhoods, the fire can burn through and they stay, they withstand it, they're fine. And again, this idea that homes are located on private property, and you do have a choice unless you are in an area with regulation. So this is voluntary, you have a choice, versus some states, some cities have regulations that compel you to do certain actions. But you have that choice about what you choose to do. I would love to see everyone do all of the recommendations, but we know that's not always feasible. So where are we at today? We are spread across the country. I'm looking at, sorry, my map over here, and with almost 2,400 active sites that are in good standing. And that's really exciting. When I joined NFPA in 2017, we were sitting just below, I think, 1,700. So that's a lot of growth. A lot of it has been in the West, but as you can see, people everywhere are acknowledging that, hey, we have wildfire potential, and we want to be a part of that solution. You know, especially when we look at the Southeast, we don't see big stories on the news coming out of these areas. But last fall, I had the chance to visit Tennessee, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia and look at their wildfire problem. And for me, it was terrifying. You know, in Tennessee, you have these communities built up on steep slopes, lots of one-way, narrow roads, which I'm sure you get some of in Nevada and some of your different communities, where you might not know how many homes are up a road. And it was just kind of really eye-opening. And while their large fires aren't as frequent, when those conditions align of maybe drier temperatures, some persistent drought, lack of rain, winds, and either human causes or lightning, the potential is huge. And we saw that in 2017 in the Gatlinburg area. So just want to remind folks, like, you're not in it alone. Everyone is trying to grapple with this problem along with other hazards. And this is one way to be a part of this kind of, for now, nationwide program, this collective response. You know, we've done some different piloting with how could we increase participation over the year. But when I think about Firewise and what does it really mean, this quote from one of our participants stands out is, it doesn't mean you're done. It doesn't mean that you've completed all the actions, but participating means, one, that you admit you have a problem and that you are trying to address it, trying to be a part of the solution. We can skip through that. As Nikhil said, there are several steps, and this is, you know, they're thrown on here on the slide. You can take a look. It's all on our website, and we can dive in if there's questions about some of the specifics. But the whole idea is It's trying to bring people together to get a good look at their community, get input from the resident level through the kind of wildfire expert level, sharing their different concerns so they can openly discuss like, well, we don't see that as a concern and here's why, versus, oh yes, you should be addressing that and here's what you can do. From that assessment, you need to make a plan and then go do work. And the big things are every year you need to do some sort of educational outreach. If you're here at this meeting, this counts. If you did a prep day event, that counts. If you're attending different things in your area, or maybe your community has been in the program for a long time, you don't feel the need to have the meetings all the time. The reminders you send out, the updates you send out via a newsletter or email, those are all different things that can count towards that outreach. But then more importantly, it's then tell us about the work that you've done. I've had some different communities trying to come on board lately, and as they're filling out the application, they run into the step where tell us about your investment. What work did you do so far? We're like, well, we haven't done it. We're just getting things going, and it's that gentle reminder of to even join, you have to accomplish some things, and that can be hours with meetings count. Admin time putting it all together counts. If you did a kickoff day, maybe with a chipper or a dumpster, or just encouraging people to do some stuff at home, all of those hours count. I am not going to come nitpick your community and ask to see all the spreadsheets. It's really in good faith how you're reporting. Your state, Nikhil, might want to see some more detail or have questions if it's very vague. But it's just a little bit of work. And when we look at the equivalency, we saw that minimum of 8 homes to join. Well, the hour equivalent is 1 hour of work per home. So 8 homes is 8 hours. You'll spend 8 hours trying to do your meetings for the risk assessment, developing your action plan, doing some outreach. So it's a pretty low barrier to meet. And we know that a lot more needs to be done, but we all have to start somewhere. So just kind of keep that in mind, especially, when you get in and you start, we have a calculator that'll show the dollar equivalency, and sometimes that can be in the thousands and it looks really big. But remember, it's also the hours worked. So if you have 100 homes, it's 100 hours. Every home should be able to do 1 hour of work. Now, maybe not every one of those homes in your boundary is participating at the beginning. So some people will kind of carry the load and make up for it. And that's okay, because over time, they'll see that positive, hey, this is a good experience. We see what you're doing. I like it. Oh, I want to make my home safer. And those homes will start to participate, and you'll see that number grow. And the final step is, you tell us all about it on the portal, and then we go through the approval process. When you get it all in, it'll go to Nikhil for review. He'll reach out with any questions. If everything looks good, it comes to NFPA. No one has to send anything. The system pushes it to me, and I'll review. If I have questions, I'll reach out. I usually don't. And then you're onboarded, and then we will work on getting your signs shipped to you if you want them. Side note, if you are a newer community that joined in the last several months, the signs are back in stock. We're working on getting them out the door. It's been an ordeal. So I just want to acknowledge that we have had some issues lately. We're working to address it, but you will eventually get that material. So skipping ahead, this is just a reminder. Once you're in the program, that doesn't stop. You have to annually, to stay in it, basically do the same thing every year. You have to do that educational outreach. Every year, you need to meet that investment through actions done by your community members, or maybe you have community owned land and you're doing some work there. And then you report it in the portal, submit the same kind of application. And this is just to really reinforce that living in a wildfire environment is not, it's not one and done, right? It's not a you check the box, you filled out the paperwork, you're good to go. That's not what the program is about. We really want to reinforce the area that the idea that this is a lifestyle, and if you live where fires burn, they're gonna happen every year, and you're always gonna have maintenance work to do. And you'll have some big projects at first, but once you get those big things out of the way, a lot of it is simple cleanup every year, doing some little alterations. So just kind of that gentle reminder of, if you want to stay in the program, you have to keep engaging with us. So I think, I have slides on like thoughts from people. That was a lot about history of the program and how do we get in and why the why. So I want to pause there. Spencer, maybe we can start addressing some questions if there are some, and if we want to, I can dive into what the people say, but I'd like to pause.
Wonderful. So if you do have questions, feel free to put them in the chat or unmute yourself. We do have one question that came in the chat earlier, asking about insurance incentives. Like, are there any confirmed insurance incentives in Nevada for Firewise community? And or what do we know about that right now?
Yeah. Nikhil, do you want me to tackle what I know and then you can share what you know?
Absolutely. Go for it, Megan. Thanks.
So as far as I know at the moment, there are no widespread incentives around Firewise USA participation in Nevada. I know conversations have happened. My supervisor has participated in some of those conversations of sharing with Nevada's Department of Insurance about Firewise and resident mitigation activities and what some of those things look like. But I don't know what has moved on from there. I can say no one has reached out to NFPA for data around community boundaries or who is participating. And I have some other comments on incentives in general, but specifically, do we know if some are happening in Nevada? I don't think so, not at this moment.
Yeah, I would echo that. Currently, there are no incentives. Let's be very clear. There's no incentives from the insurance perspective if you are a Firewise community. Once again, we shouldn't stop just because there's a insurance incentive. Like Megan was saying, this needs to be a revolving process where we're looking at our wildfire risk. And from our perspective at Nevada Division of Forestry, our responsibility is to educate the homeowners about this home hardening technique, make sure that when there is a wildfire, your house can be saved in that community by going through these different principles. The state of Nevada does have a separate government division of insurance with an insurance commissioner. That insurance commissioner may be contacted by any Nevadan. As a homeowner, you've got the right to contact them and ask them to change the insurance policies in the state. That's not currently being handled by Division of Forestry.
And that's a really good reminder. And this is the challenge we see across the country, is every state is different in how it regulates insurance. Insurers, there are a lot of rules around having direct conversations with insurance companies. They can't be in the same room talking about rates and things like that. There are federal laws that prohibit that. So NFPA does engage with different trade associations for the insurance world. And, a lot of our conversations with them, their focus is not so much on incentives, right? Giving that discount for a Firewise community or the ability to obtain. It's really around protecting your investment. And they are trying to work with the insurers to say, how can we positively reach out to customers to point them down these paths of mitigation, science-based mitigation that works. They are doing a lot to ensure that the correct science is being used. I will say, I've heard those horror stories from, someone will call me, my insurance company says I can't have anything within 200 feet of my house, right? There's no science to support that. So those are some of the angles that we're working, is trying to make sure the industry is using appropriate recommendations. And I'll also say, we've heard they might cancel your insurance or change your cost, and they're blaming it at the feet of wildfire. But in other discussions with them, they have a whole portfolio of peril that they're addressing across the country. And sometimes it's things in another state where they've had a lot of payouts that are just affecting their overall risk portfolio and they're trying to manage. I don't want to make excuses for the industry. I'm just trying to share, these are some facts that they've told us, because I think it can be difficult as a consumer to hear all the sides so you have that informed picture. Now, if you are struggling and you feel like there have been some unfair decisions made about your property, as Nikhil said, Nevada and every other state has a Department of Insurance, and they usually have a consumer complaint process. So if you are really struggling and your questions aren't being answered by your company, or if things don't make sense or don't seem right or fair, please go through that process. We can only do so much. A state agency that, you know, is a land management agency can only do so much, but it's the citizens of the state who need to go through that process to speak up and file on their behalf. So, you know, I can't really speak much else for the industry, but that is where I would point you towards, is if you're struggling and things don't seem clear, go through that process.
So in keeping with the same messaging of using Firewise to build up our communities, while we cannot help and there's no direct benefit to the insurance, think about discussing the impacts of your community and what's going on with your insurance organizations during these Firewise meetings. That way you have community members, 30, 40 people strong, that are writing to that Division of Insurance, bringing this to light. So that the whole goal here is to make, you know, one voice and one Firewise concept accessible to all Nevadans. So during your community meetings, definitely have these conversations and ask them, even provide a policy paper that they can just kind of put their name on and submit to this separate division. That'll make sure that your voice is heard at that state level.
Very good.
We did have another question in the chat about like your guidance from your experience, Megan, or Nikhil, your involvement with community, about getting people to participate in this Firewise community. You had one person say they held an educational event and didn't seem to maybe get the turnout that they were hoping for in those. In your experience, what are good ways to help encourage participation at that community level?
Oh, Janet, I see your question there, and I feel your struggles. This has been tough since the beginning, and you know, early on there was a lot of look at social science and how do you engage folks, and it's really going to vary community to community. Things that we have seen work for getting people to come, and it's timeless. Food. Food can always be that motivating factor to get folks to come to a meeting. Or, you know, looking at when are you scheduling it. So dependent on your community, if it's more retired, older community members who have a lot of flexibility, sometimes daytime meetings can work, or evening. If it's more families, you know, you're competing with meal times, practices, homework, things like that. So are there ways where you can pair up activities to support that family? You know, we've seen Living with Fire has some really great youth targeted wildfire stuff. I believe you guys have like the Ember House, right? So if you're going to have an educational event, trying to tie in and some of those things, but it's tough. It's tough to get people's attention when this work is so important. And I mean, I just bought my own first house a couple years ago, and it cost a lot of money. So I'm doing everything I can to try to protect it. But sometimes that's not enough of a point to get people to engage. So it's really looking at the values of your community. How can you get folks engaged? I would look at, you know, your network of your committee. Every community has to have a committee, and it should have a few representatives from within the community itself, and then your fire department folks. But we've seen some communities, they have their core, and then they're recruiting what they're calling like block captains or neighborhood ambassadors. So if you have, you know, let's say you're in a community of 100 homes and you've got 5 or 6 different cul-de-sacs or blocks or however you're organized, if you can go into each one of those and find someone who's at least willing to talk to their immediate neighbors. Like, I don't know everyone in my 2-block radius, but I know the 5 or 6 people right around me. I've had that conversation and I'm out there talking with them and you know, sharing ideas and looking at projects. And that's really what the program is based on, is bringing people together that way. You know, especially if we look at the home ignition zone, from my house, there are 5 homes within 100 feet. So those are 5 homes I should be working with. So that can be one way to help get the word out and use that neighbor to neighbor connection. I will say, you know, flyers, social media posts, emails only get you so far. And really it's a balance of all of those things, person to person, and then using those other tools.
Megan, I do have one clarifying question. Like, for those educational events, does that event have to be exclusively Firewise, or could, for example, it be, let's say there's a community picnic and you would have a table about Firewise at that picnic of plugging into an existing event? How does that work with this?
Yes, please. You know, it does not have to be just Firewise specific, because Firewise USA is a tool to bring folks together kind of under that fire adapted community concept. But if you are having a fire safety fair and you want to be able to share all kinds of different things, yeah, totally. Because we want people to be ready to evacuate. We want them to have, you know, working smoke alarms. We want them to know how to harden their home. So any of those community events can count, you know, towards that investment and towards that effort.
So this is pretty important. Best suggestions for getting residents. Hang on, sorry guys. Okay. So best suggestions for getting residents in a Firewise community to participate. This is a really important question, Janet, and thanks for asking it. In the state of Nevada, we do like our own personal property and like our open spaces. So this is where Firewise really needs to come from those community leaders. We have pretty high respect for our fire protection districts, our local sheriffs, and so those are the points of contact that should be at our Firewise meetings or our Firewise events. I'd say that in addition to their cool trucks, we've got some really awesome firefighting equipment that kids love to play on. I mean, even adults like to examine how these vehicles are outfitted to fight fire in the wildland urban interface. I think getting the fire protection districts on board to give a short discussion, because as a Firewise community leader, you might know all of these hoops that we need to jump through, the 8 steps and all of this engagement, but the other property owners may want to hear that same type of messaging from your local leaders. So I think getting those individuals out there is important, just for the face time with them. And then Megan mentioned the hook of providing like food. Maybe it's a barbecue during the day. I'd encourage having like a kids activity. Oftentimes the students in like the FFA programs are required to do certain amounts of community service. So I was in Eureka County recently, and all of the kids from the Future Farmers of America organization came out and interacted with all of the different stations that were geared towards wildfire preparedness across the state. I'm happy to work with you to spread the messaging, but ideally, the community members will be able to kind of gather or incentivize their neighbors to attend the event. We're happy to help set those events up, and we likely use a lot of the materials from Living with Fire just for the engagement aspect.
Yeah. Spencer, can I add one more thing on top of that? I know there's another question in the chat. And when you're having these meetings, hopefully over time, you'll start to see more engagement. But sometimes people need a purpose. So when you do have an educational event, if it's really specific to your community's Firewise USA participation or what you're hoping to get folks to do around their homes and property, give them a call to action. Make them leave with one thing you want them to do, especially if you're if you're new, if you're just interested in like, we want to learn more. We're trying to figure out what we can do. We want to talk about Firewise. Maybe at the end of that meeting, your call to action is, we need more people on our committee. Please sign up. Or, hey, we've done our assessment, but we want to get a deeper look at all the properties. Here's where you can call to sign up for your individual property walkthrough, so you know exactly what your home and property needs. Or it could be, sign up here for our chipper day. We need people to register so we can make sure to allot enough time. I think more and more, if you can have an event where they'll leave with a specific thing to do, that might keep them engaged. And some things I've seen in the region that have been successful, I came out a couple years ago to a meeting. They had some door prizes. So I know you're trying to get folks to your meeting, and it could be working with, maybe you can find some sponsors from like your local hardware landscaping store for some door prizes or some takeaways, or hey, here's a coupon for a discount on some tools to help you. It is work and it requires some creativity, but sometimes those little things can be that positive incentive to get folks to attend or engage a little. I'm really just spitballing ideas, but these are things that I hear from participating communities across the country of, here's what we're doing to get folks to come in and here's how we're engaging. Yeah. What else do we got, Spencer?
Thank you. I have a couple questions around like resources that are available for communities, and I'm getting this one. And then we had one question asking if they're part of their community emergency response team. Can we invite someone from here, maybe Nikhil, to come and give an introduction to the program or give guidance on how to start on this pathway? What are the resources or opportunities available for people here in Nevada?
Yes, so I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, this is completely an education-based position, and I'm available to come to the community, help you with the Firewise application, as well as give a similar presentation to the overview that Megan provided. So currently, I don't think I can deliver the same message with the exact same points that she hit, but I've developed a PowerPoint that can get our communities fire adapted. Yep.
Wonderful. And Nikhil, if you don't mind putting your contact in the chat for all the folks here as well. The next question related is, someone asked for what are the grants that are available for people kind of coming towards this? I know there are some Nevada Division of Forestry grants geared towards those. I don't know if you have either a link to those grants or some information there about those opportunities. The one thing I'll just add is that the Living with Fire program in partnership with Fire Nevada, Adapted Nevada, is hosting some grant writing workshops to take folks who have a vision and are working on applying for a grant to help them in that process. And so you can kind of reach out to the Living with Fire and check when those workshops are next. But Nikhil can maybe give us an idea of the grant landscape available to Nevada communities in this process.
Absolutely. So grants in Division of Forestry are handled by two of my colleagues. If we could follow up by sending me an email, and I can share more information. Grants are kind of interesting because there's pockets of money that can be used for items A, B, and C, and different pockets of money for items D, E, and F. So I want to make sure that that kind of messaging is clear. I do want to mention that Division of Forestry did get a new grant award that will be parceled out to sub-grants this year. But I'd prefer that my colleagues talk more about the grants that are available. As a take-home message when it comes to grants, where we really want the grants to come from come from and with support from fire protection districts and other government agency that's typically better set up to handle the administrative functions of receiving and then reporting for the different federal grants. A lot of times grants funding comes with a laundry list of steps that we have to jump through to actually get the money and put it on the ground effectively.
Perfect. So you can email Nikhil and his contact, and he can kind of send you to the folks who at the Nevada Division of Forestry who can walk you through the ins and outs of those, because there are some pieces there. And that's also where I know in some of the fire adapted Nevada programming, like we had the Fire Adapted Nevada Summit for the first one in February of 2024, and we'll do it again this year. It's a whole workshop hosted at UNR that was free for people, and a big part of that was identifying grant opportunities and help navigating all the ins and outs out there. Megan, anything else to add related to grants and how this connects into this process before we move on to our next question?
Yeah, I would say, because I think I saw that there were a few people from other states also on the call, but every state's kind of similar in either their division of forestry or natural resources, where I would start with them and asking about grants. We have seen success, we hear from different communities who are concerned about the neighboring property. Maybe it's Forest Service land, state land, something like that, and they want them to do work. And when you just have individuals who aren't taking their own ownership and doing things, some of those agencies are less likely to listen just because they have a lot of demand on their plate as well. So coming together in an organized fashion through Firewise or other similar type ideas can strengthen your part of that conversation and demonstrating, here's what we are doing, here's what we would like to do with you. And there was a really good example when I was at a conference in Oregon back in 2020 where they shared this specifically. They'd gone individually to the Forest Service and said, hey, your land is threatening our homes. And they just kind of said, And then they became a Firewise community. They were doing things together. They had their assessment. They had their prioritized action plan to show. And it really opened the door for conversation. So it's not quite specific to grants, but really engaging those other adjacent landowners and work. But we do know for some of these grants, when you can show that bigger footprint, right? It's really hard to say like, well, this one home right here, we're going to give a bunch of money to, and it's going to, make a world of difference, especially if they're out on their own, not surrounded by anything. It's that footprint of the landscape, multiple properties that are a little more appetizing for the grantor when they're looking at different projects. But that's a broad brush. I don't speak for Nikhil or Nevada. That's just kind of what we've seen as we've engaged in these different conversations. And we do engage in these conversations. I hear from other states and communities about like the new community wildfire defense grants from the Forest Service and questions of how can Firewise communities apply. And it's really that collaboration with your fire protection district, being in the CWPP, having an assessment and a plan. So all of these things strengthen your opportunity. Nothing's a guarantee. There's only so much money to go around, but the more proactive you're being and having good documentation, the better off you're going to be.
Thank you. That's super helpful. I do have a technical question about someone who has a community that is Firewise, but the question is, how do we get an assessment of our area that is Firewise but needs to be renewed? Can you just describe the process there?
I'm gonna see if Nikhil wants to handle that.
Yeah, sure. So your risk assessments can be completed either by a wildland urban interface coordinator, if you have somebody like that. It looks like they need to be completed every, I think it's 5 years, or is it every 3 years? They need to be updated. So I can help facilitate completing that risk assessment for you if you have that good relationship with your county fire protection district. Then we'd prefer that a current, like structure firefighter comes out and completes that risk assessment. Now the risks are only one part. Your local fire protection district can also complete a specific site assessment. So go door to door, and those homeowners that would like a home defense assessment completed, they'll help you do that. So your resources are either myself or your local fire protection district. If you would like to build that point of contact, then I'm also happy to facilitate it. Just depends on where you're based.
Yeah, thank you. Every state's a little different in how they want them done, and so I always like to defer to the state partner. But again, it is that collaboration between your residents on your Firewise committee and that fire department. I would say most fire departments, if they're coming out to do an assessment, they want to meet with you and go through it with you. So please make yourself available, because they might have, you're both going to bring different perspectives to the table, and we have definitely heard stories of sometimes the community getting focused on like just one thing that, yes, it's important, but it's not of the highest concern or threat to those homes. And that even ties into, when we look at, so I'm going off on a little tangent, but it'll tie back in. When we look at Firewise participation across the country and those communities that have been in it for a long time or even a short time, everyone's on their own journey. They are choosing how much to do every year. They are focusing on their different priority areas and kind of that level of work that's being completed. Ideally, we would love to see every home in a community working to the high level. The IBHS, the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety, has a wildfire prepared home program. And it's different in that you have to meet all the things in order to get the designation. And there's an inspection process and a fee, all of that. But it is really highlighting it's the collectiveness of all of the things on the structure and that 0 to 5 foot space that truly help a home. So we would love, that's the ideal. That's what we'd love to see. But every community is different. We have had some that have faced a wildfire and have had mixed results. And one of those in California, we reached out to them after, and they shared like the area where the fire came into their community, they knew was a problem. They weren't ready to tackle it. They didn't want to tackle it. They were hesitant to engage maybe the time, money, and resources. And that's why you need to have everyone coming together. Is they were focusing on other things that definitely had a role to play. But maybe if the fire department or someone from the state had said, no, right here, this is where you need to start, it could have made, not a guarantee, but it might have made a difference. So, when you have those experts coming out to talk to you, really try to lean into the advice that they're giving. And, if some of it can be hard to hear, there are some hard truths out there about our communities and where we live and what we're seeing in terms of how homes were built 50 years ago, where they were built. And we're trying to fix a problem that's decades long in the making. So some of those conversations are hard, but it's, chipping away, just trying to work through things, but really listening to the expertise, but asking good questions too, right? Again, it's your property, so you have the right to ask these questions. But I just would say that on the risk assessment front is really make sure it's a collaboration, that people are able to be there so they can ask good questions and get good input.
Thank you.
Firewise and NFPA have done a lot of homework or given us all of the tools to make this happen in our local communities. In the chat, I've dropped the risk assessment guide created by NFPA, as well as the entire template that you can go through and see what's going to be judged when you're completing the risk assessment.
Wonderful. One thing I'll just add is Someone messaged me with a question about finding people to do the work, like defensible space work. Here, the UNR Living with Fire program has been organizing trainings in both the kind of what Eastern Slope, Washoe County, Reno area, and the Tahoe Basin. And so we've been training contractors who on how to create effective defensible space. And so there's a list on our website. I'll put that in the chat. Those are people who've gone through like a 10-hour training with us, who would be great people to call up because we've given them training and they'll know what they're doing. In our last few minutes, for Megan and Nikhil, I was curious to have, let's say, kind of someone here is new to Firewise and all of this, but excited about kind of doing things in their community. What are the 2 or maybe 3 things that they could do next coming out of this meeting to help progress in this step towards becoming a Firewise community?
All right, I'll start. You know, if you're new and you're interested, I think the next thing would be go talk to some of your neighbors, right? Start to build those relationships so you can build that committee. And reach out to your local fire department to share like, hey, my neighborhood is concerned. We want to start doing things. Can you help us? And then, you know, there's so many things you could go look at for inspiration. You know, I know Nikhil and others can be your resource for a presentation. I was going to drop a couple links in the chat, and I will, of some stuff we've done over the years. A couple years ago, we finished a pilot where we asked 7 communities to do more, to say, okay, you can have up to 100 homes, and we want all of the recommendations completed, and here's a little bit of money to help you. $2,000 over 2 years. But we have a story map and a report from that. We also have a video from Durango where this community had a fire, and the work they'd done made a difference, and the fire chief thanked them and acknowledged the difference that it made. So looking at some of those, having something to share to start the conversation would be really good. But, you know, I say go jump off the end of the dock into the deep water and just go for it. That's really kind of what it's about. But yeah, it's hard because every state's a little different, every community is a little different on what the best next steps are. But I'd go back and start to recruit. That's where I would start. That is an excellent point in the chat from Michael. A good place can be your property owners association or homeowners association board. In Nevada specifically, we've seen a really strong uptake of the program with communities that are an HOA, because you have a structure there to help kind of be your committee, give some guidance. Sometimes through the architectural design or the landscaping committee, they can help spread the message. So those are good places too. But I'll let Nikhil share some of what he'd like to see folks do.
I would pretty much echo everything that Megan said on this one. I'd say start with your community members. Everybody that's on today seems to understand that wildfire is a year-round risk in Nevada. Given the fuel loads that we have, we get brush fires that have huge rates of spread. So you don't even need to be exactly abutting all of that wildland interface. You could be a few houses in and still have that same wildfire risk. Again, going with the Nevada concept, we need to spread this messaging from kind of the ground up. So if you're excited about wildfire awareness and you want to take these steps, try and get the community members, maybe that play golf with you on Sundays or that go shooting with you on Mondays, get them involved and aware of the wildfire risk in the community. And that way, the community can kind of go higher up the chain. So they say, hey, we recognize this risk. We want to be Firewise. Let's start engaging with the fire chiefs and just kind of climb the ladder from there. That way, at your fire protection district level, they can be a kind of county-based coordinator, and you'll be in charge of your community. You can start bouncing ideas off of other Firewise communities. I'm here to help support and facilitate that type of communication. So if you're looking for places to start, instead of hearing it from me, I'll reference another community member like Mr. Lafferty that spoke up. He's also in the Firewise program. So we basically want to connect Nevadans to other Nevadans to see how this is going to play out in the state.
Thank you, Nikhil. And yeah, please kind of copy down his contact information from the chat. You can also Google him at the Nevada Division of Forestry. He's a great point of contact to help you through this process. At this point, if you have any other questions, please feel free to hop on and share any of that. I will try and I will copy all of the links that we have shared in the chat of helpful resources, and we'll try and send them out in a follow-up email or include them in the recording of the webinar that we'll post next week. And so we'll kind of send out all of these extra informations that we shared with you today. And so thank you all for your time for being here. Please feel free to ask more questions if you have them. If not, please feel free to dip out, and we appreciate all of you taking this time to learn more about Firewise.
Spencer,
Thank
can I
you.
just say thanks everyone who attended. You know, this work can take a lot, and you being here, it's always inspiring to see who's willing to take on helping their community, and make sure to, as you go through it, take care of yourself. You know, it can be a lot and it can get frustrating at times. So, you know, keep chipping away, reach out to your networks of support. But what you're doing matters, and we appreciate all of you and your willingness to step up and be a leader.
Thank you. Thanks, Megan, for the information, and thanks, Spencer, for facilitating.
Yeah, thank you all for being here. Thank you, Megan and Nikhil, for being such wonderful resources for our community.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, with that, we'll let you all go on your way, and please stay tuned for more information about Firewise coming to you throughout the rest of 2024.